And we're live.
Hello.
Hello.
La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Thursday afternoon, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and my goodness,
Thanks, Willie.
Bragg. Woke states or blue states are not known for banning books. However, book banning is alive and well in Florida and Texas. Cancel culture was never created by leftists, but created by the right wing. I think that... Let's put it this way.
Yes, originally that's how it happened.
I would agree with that.
Yes, it was the Christian right crap.
What I would also say, which I think is important to note, is that when you see people on the Democratic side that are gung-ho about censorship, it's never working class populist people. Those are not the ones that are concerned about that. It's usually people of a certain class.
It's Tipper Gore.
Why her? Why her?
Because that's what comes to mind when I think about censorship. It's the middle-aged white lady in the suburb, whatever, that is clutching their pearls.
Have anything better to do with.
Well, they have a lot of time on their hands. Obviously, they're very privileged because if you can be worried about this, then you obviously aren't worried about anything else. And so, yeah, that's who I think it is. And I just thought of her because the PMRC.
Well, we were going to get into it with our first guest. We have two guests today. We're going old school. We're going back to the days.
Well, we are in campaign season. So even though the Democrats aren't holding a primary, we still acknowledge that we are in campaign season.
Yes, but as bad as the Democrats are, the Republicans want to prove constantly that they are just as bad, if not worse. And so, of course, what do we have going on right now? They are banning the state of Florida in accordance with the rules of Governor DeSanctimonious. Because if there ever was a time to give him the moniker DeSanctimonious, it would be right now.
He is very DeSanctimonious.
Very DeSanctimonious. And for what and to what end? So the Webster's Dictionary Student Edition is being banned from libraries. I don't know if this is just at schools.
What words do they? Because it probably has like the word queer in it. They have a lot of issues, or it probably has transgender in it. Like it could be one thing. Conservative
viewer and friend BW is saying probably because it provides propaganda instead of definitions.
I'm pretty sure the Webster Student Dictionary is not, but okay.
Has it gotten to the point where
everybody has to make everything an argument and fight? So it's like if the blue people say this, we're against it just because they're blue people. If the red people say nobody's using reason, nobody's having discussions. They're fighting before they even hear the other person finish their thought. It is just all tribalism. It is so absurd.
And think about how many dictionaries have been printed and how much paper, trees have been used. But let's ban the entire thing so that way we have to chuck these.
So Merriam Webster is now woke.
Apparently, and if there isn't anyone who could speak to something so pathetically,
it's very ludicrous. Exactly. Yes, really Webster is just clearly propaganda.
Yeah, it wouldn't seem that there would be any good use out of banning books because
only in Florida.
Yeah, well, that also speaks to the governor who went on
banning the dictionary.
Well. Not only that, but last night they had the debate, if you will. Again, this is the bridesmaids event between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, and so by them going on stage and was questioned, Governor DeSantis was questioned by what seemed to be a plant in the audience, but
I think everybody is a plant in the audience,
but a valid question nonetheless. Basically saying, Governor, you're on board with fracking. You're not cool with fracking in the state of Florida because it doesn't help you there. But on the national level, you don't seem to have a problem with it. Do you seem to think that there's any issue with protecting people's right to have clean drinking water? And he said, we're going to frack. And that's it.
He did?
So this, of course he did.
I love that.
He just double stepped.
See, I actually like that. But that's where he's sort of like trying to channel Trump.
He is. No, we're totally fracking. So,
it doesn't matter, Ron. Yeah. You're a small little man. You're a loser.
And a total loser, and he's gonna eat my dust. And so
you're a loser too.
Why? Because I can channel Trump well?
No, I meant Trump.
Yes. Well, he is very likely, despite all the obstacles, still going to be the GOP.
Honestly, it is so
the hilarity.
We so deserve this.
The hilarity will continue. Only it will now be dialed up to 1,000. Not a 10, not 100, 1,000 and 11. So it's going to break the Richter scale. The Iowa caucus, for those of you who think that there's still a primary season happening.
Well, for the non-democratic sycophants, there is a primary. So yes, what is happening? And there is a caucus.
Yes, there is a caucus that's happening. And, we need to let everybody know. I'm
not a fan of the caucus.
Why aren't you a fan of the caucus?
Because it only allows one day. That's my biggest problem with it, is everybody has to be able to, first of all, you have to be able to not be at work that day. It's a work day. It really limits people. I know that they like the idea of discussion, and I appreciate that, but then you have to have it over a period of time.
If I remember correctly, during the 2016 primary with Bernie and Hillary, and then obviously the GOP, I'm pretty sure there were some caucus primaries that were done on a Saturday. I'm pretty sure that.
But it's whatever the day is the day. And so if you can't make that day, you don't get to participate. What if you work on a Saturday? My point is the caucus system does not allow for enough open-ended time for enough participation. That's my opinion.
Fair enough.
That's my opinion.
So the Iowa caucus will take place on Monday, January 15th. And what that's going to look like, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not even 100% sure if it's just the GOP that's participating.
You know when the caucus worked? When Little House on the Prairie was a big thing and they had a caucus in Walnut Grove because everybody in town was at the caucus. So it counted, that's the thing. A caucus only works for a really small
You know what that? You know
we
what
don't
that?
have that
You know
anymore.
what that channels for me is? Remember the lottery? Remember the story of the lottery?
No.
You don't remember that one?
No.
Okay, so effectively, what happened was that, like a caucus, the entire town came to the town square to do a lottery, and you would think it was about winning something important, and everyone was assured that, oh, I'm not going to win, and then eventually the person who wins gets stoned to death.
And not in a good way.
No, not in a good way. Well,
that's the first thing I think of. I'm like,
yes.
Oh my God, they gave them weed?
Definitely one of the more interesting stories. But I think I don't really understand exactly what sort of the message was supposed to be.
The message is be careful what you're volunteering for.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
That's the message.
But nevertheless, the caucus system did work pretty well for Bernie Sanders in 2016, especially because of the fact that the enthusiasm with his campaign was significantly higher than anybody else's outside of Trump's. And so as a result, his ability to overcome the party putting its thumb on the scale, not in his favor, was able to be overcome by just an amazing swell of grassroots support. And that's sort of where we are at right now with almost any and all of the campaigns that we're seeing.
Especially with the complete, influx of the Israel lobby against them. Like all we have are like on the ground skills people.
Well,
that's all we got.
That's all we're going to have. And of course, with anybody who's running for office, especially local office, and the one thing we talk about constantly on our show is that there is a complete and utter neglect, especially by the Democratic Party. But I don't even say especially the Democratic Party. I would just say it's a lot of people on the political left who concern themselves much more with a top-down approach than a ground-up approach. If you think you're going to create any type of sustainable change in the system, you are not going to change it by just focusing on what's happening at the very top. Quite frankly, that's where your vote and your influence matters the least. Where it matters the most is in local races.
Yeah.
And what better than to have a conversation with somebody who's running in a local race here in the state of Florida, where we are completely overmatched by the GOP in Tallahassee.
Yeah, our Democrats in Tallahassee just basically run around on defense.
Defense. That's what you're playing.
And what's so scary for people who don't live in Florida, we actually have some solid Dems that are in there fighting the good fight. We really do. There's just not enough of them to push any legislation. But we have a bunch of good Dems. Imagine what Florida would look like without them. See, I don't think people really understand, no matter how backwards we seem, that's with a good resistance fighting the good fight. If that wasn't there, I think I'd be the Handmaid's Tale right now. No, I'd be wearing the red robe. We'd be in the Handmaid's Tale.
Well, let's see if we can add one more to the table, because I think we can agree that there really is, and this goes for both political parties, when you have one party dominance in a given state, it doesn't go well.
It's just a waste.
Yeah.
It's just, it's very unproductive.
And it's not working on behalf of working people, which is where it's at.
No.
So without further ado, we are very pleased to welcome a gentleman who may very well be heading to Tallahassee in, I believe, less than a week.
Yes, we're having a special election too. There's a special election happening right now, and it's Florida's 35th
House District. Tom Keene, welcome to Generational Change.
Well, good afternoon, folks. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'd just like to follow up on your comment about the caucus. This election, this special election in House District 35 is next Tuesday, the 16th. It's the day after the Iowa caucus. and I can give you a reason why it's coming the day after and not the month before, is that this is a flippable district, and I think our governor didn't want to be embarrassed up in Iowa.
Oh, that, you know what? That does sound like the kind of nonsense that goes on there. I mean, look,
Tomfoolery that he would do.
well, but the truth is that kind of nonsense is on both sides. Okay. The Democrats have essentially canceled Iowa and New Hampshire, and they're not even having a primary. So that's not very Democratic either.
No, but
that's
at the
my
same
point.
time,
I mean, it's bad all around.
Yes, but at the same time, our state has very lackluster approaches to the electoral system, and unfortunately, as you know, and we actually had a heavy hand here locally in getting the ballot measure across the threshold for having women's reproductive freedom, which will be on the ballot next November.
Yes, everybody, we're trying to get our bodily autonomy back.
Which
support.
Which on what you would consider the blue side, the left side of the aisle, is definitely going to be advantageous, because I do think that is going to play a role.
Oh, yeah.
Were you involved in any capacity in helping generate support for getting the ballot measure passed up in Osceola County?
No, getting it on the ballot.
On the ballot.
So in Orange and Osceola County, that's where I'm House District 35. I'm definitely running on that issue, and we have been promoting the fact that reproductive freedom is something that is at the top of my agenda. I signed the petition, but I was not involved directly with that organization as they pressed forward. We did just have a reproductive listening session last week, and I had Anna Escamani, the local state rep from Orlando, and a fierce advocate for women's reproductive freedom was with me on the panel as we laid out what specifically that I would be running on. So absolutely.
Yeah, shout out Escamani 26.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We love her.
You never know.
We love her. So, she is one of the best voices. And actually, when Peter had forwarded that you were coming on, I looked it up and I'm like, oh, well, Anna likes him, so he must be okay.
Yeah.
So that was it's a very good endorsement to get from her. We are in a shit show in Tallahassee, if you've not noticed that, Tom. What inspired you? Because you're a little bit older than most first-time candidates running, and as somebody who is also a little bit older than those people, what inspired you this time? Because obviously you've been knowledgeable and involved.
Sure. So I've been active here locally in Orlando for many years with the Democratic Party. I served as a precinct leader. I'm still a precinct leader. I was elected as the treasurer for the county party, and I volunteered and done a lot of work for other candidates throughout for the time that I've lived here in Orlando. So I'm just at a time in my life that I'm able to devote most of my time to something like this and be a full-time legislator, which is obviously not the way that it's envisioned, probably, since they only are in session for 60 days a year, which, by the way, they're in session now. And guess what? My district is not represented.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful the way that happens. But I spent 20 years on active duty in the military. I served, and I just want to continue to serve. So that's why I'm running.
No, I think that's great. It's like now you have the time. It's interesting. Like you have, and also I would like to suggest that as we get older, we have better wisdom. Like what you're capable of contributing now is probably a lot better than what you would have contributed 50 years ago. And what's your party politics like up there? Because let me tell you something, the Democratic Party in Broward, have you heard about us? We've got issues.
Okay. I'll let you tell me, because I'm concentrating on my House district right now.
Absolutely.
I'm not looking at the statewide. So
it does seem that
we do have volunteers coming from across the state to help us knock on doors and making phone calls and texting. So that's been really incredible, the amount of support that I receive statewide. But I have kept my focus internal. I haven't looked at.
No, I know, but your local party has been helpful because right. That's nice. It must be nice to be a chosen candidate.
Yeah, the left populist fervor is definitely strongest in the state of Florida along the I-4 corridor. There's no question that's where a lot of it comes from. You have the support.
All the good people are up there.
Yeah, you have the support of Anna Escamani at the state level. You have the support of Maxwell Frost at the federal level. And they obviously are the two most popular, if you will, representatives in that region. And they have a plethora of volunteers, which I am sure is definitely playing a role. Can you talk more about the grassroots element of this campaign and how that will ultimately push you over the finish line?
Right. So I would also add State Senator Victor Torres, who represents most of Osceola County. So District 35 has Orange and Osceola, so we have to talk both counties. Both of them are structured slightly different, which makes it interesting when you go to one side or the other. So, for example, early voting ends a day earlier in Osceola, but their hours are a little longer during the week. So it's kind of crazy. We've had so many volunteers, so many different groups that have stepped up to help. For example, you were just talking about women's reproductive freedom. I did get an endorsement from Planned Parenthood PAC that came in the last couple of weeks. So they obviously recognize the importance that this election will play for the statewide initiative in November. We win this, we are showing that the voters understand the issues really well, and that gives us a huge jump going into next fall. We've had just folks from all over. We had 80 people, and that's the correct number, 80 people.
Wow.
I had Congressman Frost and a special guest from South Florida, David Hogue from Stone Douglas, and he came up and spoke at our canvas, and obviously that drew a lot of people in, and we probably knocked on 1,500 doors that day with David, which was fantastic.
Excellent.
That's amazing. And you know what? So what's cool about it when you're dealing with a state house race is the district size is so much more manageable in terms of really being able to have on ground connection.
Right.
And that is such a benefit when
Sure.
80 volunteers for a state house seat is enough to easily canvass the whole district. Like that's like the way you got to do it.
It was fantastic. Now I've made it a personal a goal of mine to make sure that I go into every single precinct. I have actually knocked on 3,500, 4,000 doors myself personally across the district. The district is geographically it's huge. It's 120 miles from one end to the other. Part of it is in Orlando, the Orlando metro area, so it's very suburban, very dense. But as you go south into Osceola County, which, by the way, is one of the largest cattle producing counties in the whole country, south of a certain highway that your viewers may not know, 192, it's all cattle ranches. So very few people live south of that area. So it gets real rural. So we're reaching out to those folks via phone because it's almost impossible to go knock on their doors. But we are knocking on doors every single day, and we've been doing so since before the primary when I started running, and then since after I won the primary, we've just doubled our efforts, and we're 100% knocking on doors.
What I garnered from that is there's not a lot of people living south of 192, and it's hard to get to people's houses. And I'm sitting there and thinking, you could not be advertising for me to come move there any better. You're like, there's so few people there. We can't really get to them. I'm like, oh, that's where I want to go.
Yeah, we have that here in Broward County in two towns, Southwest Ranches, which is out of basically everybody's price range, and West Davie, and that's about it. And so we are very developed down here in South Florida, but there are, I think a lot of people don't recognize when people think of, like cattle ranching and things like that, they think more of, Texas, the Southwest regions, Colorado, Utah.
I didn't realize there was so much cattle. I mean, I always knew we were horse country. We're always horse country, but I didn't realize that.
Agriculture in Central Florida is about as big as any place in the whole country. It's
agribusiness in Osceola is huge. It's one of the, if it wasn't for Disney, that would be the central industry for Osceola County right now. Obviously, we're trying to diversify it. We want to bring some high-tech things in, which is important. The cattle ranching is actually slowing down a little bit as some of the multi-generation families have been selling off their ranching acreage, and they've turned into housing developments. Of course. So we're growing like crazy. So maybe at the next census, we'll see the district will actually split in half, and we'll see that all of Osceola County will be covered by basically a state rep that's only in Osceola, as opposed to the split between Orange and Osceola.
Yeah, it sounds pretty diverse. I mean, we used to cover two counties, but it was basically the same thing. But to have because those demographics have different needs.
They do.
They're just different.
Yeah. And you got to keep a foot in both counties, right? You cannot favor one over the other. About 80% of the folks live in Orange County, and 20% of them live in Osceola, and out of that 20%, most of them live north of that 192 that you mentioned. So, and I will say, you just turn your head, and another 400 or 500 houses go up. It's just incredible what they're doing.
Yeah,
so it's amazing. I would expect that we'll see another Orlando at some point, right? South in Osceola County. It's getting that big.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point, Tom. And obviously, we have a lot of issues here in the state. Of course, the cost of living is very high. Housing is extremely expensive, and insurance is even worse. One of the primary issues that you would be focused on, obviously, that is a huge one. But from your perspective, obviously being in Central Florida, what are the primary issues of this moment that you would be focusing on in Tallahassee? And quite frankly, if you are able to get to Tallahassee starting next week, what are the issues that you think you could bridge the divide with the GOP on, since they are in the majority control?
Sure, we'll still be in the super minority, as they call it, even when I'm elected. The two issues that we're running on, and the ones that I hear at the door when I personally knock on the door, are property insurance. That's a huge one, and reproductive freedom. And I tell folks, when you're looking at the old guy here, right? So when I knock on the door, if a woman answers, I don't bring up reproductive freedom. I let her bring that up. I want to make sure that we lead with something that I'm comfortable with, and that's with property insurance. And that has just resonated. Folks' property insurance. My next door neighbor went from $1,700 to $4,000.
Oh yeah,
in 1 year. And so we've got to figure out a way to get control over that. And we had a listening session yesterday with former representative and former consumer advocate for insurance, Sean Shaw, was up, and we were talking about some of the things that we think we could do to basically cap these rate increases. And I think that is a bipartisan issue.
Definitely.
Even though you saw the speaker kind of slow things down a little bit up there on property insurance reform, and I don't know that they're going to look at anything this year. I know there's been a couple bills proposed, but whether they get through or not, I'm doubtful. But that is a bipartisan thing, and that is one that I think that we could work together on, and make sure that the voters, the people who are paying these high rates, they're Republicans and Democrats, right? They're both. So they're just Floridians, and so we want to be able to provide them with some relief and get a handle on the highest rates in the country right now. We don't need to be the highest. We should be fleet average. We've got hurricanes in multiple states, and we're still paying the highest rate. So it's a little crazy.
I would definitely agree. I'm in commercial real estate, but one of the reasons I do not believe that anything is really changing in the manner that it really needs to. I know that the excuse that they're giving is Surfside. As far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest problems, and again, this gets to state economics, not federal economics, but at the state level, at the micro level, the GOP is simply not going to raise taxes on the rich to mitigate the costs of what it is.
Which is what needs to happen.
One of the biggest problems we do have in this country is that public education is tied to property taxes. The fact that that is a defining characteristic of what so many communities end up looking like. For example, when you're talking about the affluent suburbs of Orlando versus the inner city of Orlando, that would be a prime example of where that doesn't make sense. I mean, we can't necessarily just restructure the whole economic system, but I think we can all agree that in this particular state, and now that we are the third most populous state and growing, that because there is no attempt to get the super rich to pay their fair share, and there are a hell of a lot of them that come to this state for that purpose, that is something that has to be, we cannot be afraid to talk about that issue, especially in Tallahassee.
Well, it is interesting that my opponent has got some ads out saying how I'm going to be the one to raise property rates for everybody, and that one of my pockets is lined with trial lawyers, and then the other is lined with insurance companies. If you think about that, they're adversaries in this, right? So it's kind of crazy how I'm getting tarred and feathered with both sides of this. I will say that one of the things that they brought up that I did not promote was helping out millionaire homes with Citizens property insurance, right? If you have a very expensive home and you have the wealth, then you should be paying market rates for your property insurance. Absolutely.
And on top of everything else, they don't pay state income tax. So that's a huge part of it as well. But
you're not going to get me to advocate for state income tax. I'm not going to do that. So
no, I'm not doing that either. But there is an issue with them not wanting to pay, and obviously getting away with having a GOP supermajority.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I heard last night at the listening session was that when an insurance company goes to testify in Tallahassee, whatever they say is taken as gospel. That they can't, whatever they say is the truth, right? Which that's not exactly the way it is, right? They're going to skew things to to their advantage. And we have to have very good oversight, not only of the insurance commission or insurance commissioner or the CFO who has that insurance commissioner underneath them, but also we want to make sure that the consumer, who for some reason they don't believe, they're heard as well. So we have to come to some compromises. There's got to be give and take on both sides. And right now, all it has been on the insurance side.
How do you see this race wrapping up? Because obviously we saw the propaganda text messages that have been going out. To me, that's a sign of desperation. They do not feel that they can beat you straight up. So how do you see this ultimately coming to pass as we get to next Tuesday?
Well, I would just tell folks it's going to be very, very close. And I need everybody to get out and vote. Early voting started right now. We have 2 counties, so we have slightly different voting times and dates. But basically, the 16th is the actual election day. Everybody can vote on the 16th that hasn't already voted. Early voting started in both counties and will go through, as I said before, through Saturday in Osceola and then through Sunday in Orange County. And if you have a vote by mail ballot and you haven't mailed it in, I highly recommend that you drop it off at one of those early voting locations now at the secure drop box, just to ensure that ballot reaches the SOE by election day.
Oh, wow. You know what? People, get out and vote. If you're in Orange or Osceola, it's like, and it's especially hard when there's a special election because you don't have any momentum from anything national going on, like to get people to the polls. So it's really important, but that could also be in your favor.
Yeah.
Well, I just want folks to get out and vote. That's the main thing, right? And the turnout will be, it is going to be pretty anemic. There's no question. It may be a little bit better than I predicted, but more people vote for American Idol than will vote. And as we talked about here at the local level, this is where your everyday life is impacted the most.
Yeah.
Right? So your energy rates are right here locally impacted by who you elect, and folks just are tuned out. I think we need to tune them in and get them out to vote.
Well, that's why everything starts at the local level. Guys, please go to keenforfl.com. This is the website. If you are going to make a final pitch in terms of what you could use some help with right now, is it phone banking, text banking, canvassing, contributions?
Yeah.
What is the home stretch of the campaign need
for
right
people
now?
that don't live in your district that can help without voting?
Yes, 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 and yes. Right.
Okay.
Today is the last day that you can give to the campaign financially. Today's at midnight. So if you go to my website, there is a donate button. If you give $5 or $10, that's fantastic. If you give a little bit more, that's great too. We have canvas events starting. Well, we've been doing them all along, but we have them starting on Saturday at 9 a.m. in Osceola County, at noon in Orange County. We're going to be back in Orange County again on Sunday at noon, and we will actually be canvassing on Monday as well. And phone banks are going to be up and running. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that voters know that there's a race and who they should be voting for.
Well, I cannot imagine that the opponent has the ground game like that. There's no way they have that level of volunteers out pounding the pavement for them. And that's really what matters at the end of the day.
They probably got that corporate money, though. You got to keep.
You know what? And there's a difference between hired canvassers and volunteer canvassers.
100%.
It's a very different thing. The level of interest, passion, excitement is just not there for a paid canvasser, no matter how much they're paid.
Yep. And that's why the grassroots is where it's at. Tom, we can't thank you enough for coming on. And obviously, this is where it begins. It begins at the grassroots level. So anybody who is thinking about getting involved this weekend, this is the opportunity to flip a key district. Again, it is a long game, but
we need all the help we can get in Tallahassee.
We absolutely can. And we can certainly use Mr. Tom Keene. So thank you so much for coming on. And guys, remember, go to that website, contribute if you can. But also, remember, if you can't give, any type of phone or text banking in the home stretch really makes a huge difference. So definitely get out there if you can.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
So this has been one of many conversations that we need to have when it comes to local races. And again, forgive us because
it's so funny. The reason I'm laughing is, like, right now the lawn maintenance people I'm in a place where they do it's like a subdivision.
I'm in a cul-de-sac.
But it's like 0 lot line, so I don't have control. It's like subcontract, whoever does it.
Very close to one another.
Right, and so they're out there with the mowers and the blowers, and it literally feels like they're right up against our garage.
Double K, we love you.
Mm.
Thank you so much. It really means a lot. And yeah, very often we get so concerned. And this is one thing I will also say for those that are completely dissuaded by the Democratic Party establishment and so forth. It is so much different at the local level than it is at the federal level. There is no comparison, even at the state level. And the state level Dems in the state of Florida, we know what the issues are there.
And let me tell you, the Democratic state reps that we are friendly with, they're great. There are some seriously really good Democratic reps fighting the good fight in Tallahassee, and they actually do get things done, not big sexy things, so that not necessarily newsworthy things, but things that help people.
They're not bought by the corporate special interest money. And this is why the campaigns of Charlie Crist and Val Demings are so dissuading to so many voters, and rightfully so. They had a lot of cash, especially Val Demings, and they did nothing to help any of the local races or candidates that were running.
It was like 20 potential seats that the Democrats didn't even put a candidate in.
It's almost like you could have all of that cash and you could have recognized that there was no way you were going to win, but say, you know what, I'm going to take at least a couple of million of this money and help some of these local campaigns that with just $10, $20, $30,000 could probably make the difference in them having enough to get over the finish line. Kind of like our friend Anthony Nieves and Gabe.
Who's running again, by the way.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And those types of candidates can make the difference in flipping the map.
Right. But the Democrats would have rather given an extra $25 million to Val Demings.
Well, the Democratic establishment. We have to be clear about that.
But you know what, though? It is and it isn't, because anybody who donates to the Democrats, that's where the money's going. So
yeah, that's why you have to be able to have choices, like whether or not you donate to Act Blue. Well, the one thing you can do when Act Blue asks you for a contribution is they always ask you for a tip at the end. There's no reason to give a tip. I tip when I go out to eat.
I don't ever tip. I
you don't
almost
tip, you cheapskate.
On Act Blue, the fact that they even ask for that when we all know that they're skimming. What is it you need your tip for? What is it you need your tip for?
To pay for Nancy Pelosi's stock.
Like, seriously,
Just
like
saying.
what is that tip for? You're slinging hash. You're busting ass, waiting tables. You need that tip.
Something like that.
Good grief.
So we have a number of stories to cover before our esteemed guest, Michael Sainato, I think is how you say it. I believe he's in Orlando as well, working for The Guardian. So go figure. We've got a Central Florida contingent that is going on.
Not on purpose, really. I mean, it just sort of worked out that way.
No, but...
well, I didn't even know they were having a special election until you said we were having the Tom on. Like, I didn't realize that there was a special election.
They do a really good job of not letting us know about any of these things going on, which is not surprising. I mean, we should just
well, I mean, no, but in reality, why would somebody down here know when their special election is? It's unnecessary in most cases.
All right, so we're going to give you guys a choice. So we've got the Aaron Rodgers, Matt McAfee story. Okay, so you're not crazy about that.
I hate the TMZ shit.
Eric Adams decides that it's better to give all of the money to the police and take it away from social services. Eric Adams.
I don't like any of this. Like, but you're going to subject me to watching this? Will?
Or do you want to see Andrea Mitchell interview Tony Blinken?
No, I don't like any of that. That's what we have to talk about today.
That's what's on the menu.
That's so unfortunate.
Okay.
There has to be something more interesting to talk about, people. I put on the news. It's so funny, just for shits and giggles every once in a while. And I'll always I'll go CNN, MSNBC, Fox, just flip through to see what's going on. And it is inevitably, anytime I put on Fox, it's everything about migrant crisis and border wall. And if I put on CNN and MSNBC, it's all about Trump. And it's like, there is no other news. So I don't know where all this
Colin, do me a favor, put the Blinken interview in the box so I can stop and start. But we're going to cover Eric Adams, who is the mayor of New York City. Look, there is a migrant crisis in this country. There's no question that is going on. And for me, I have always had the same position, as I always will when it comes to immigration. It is deliberately done for the purpose of enriching multinational corporations to pay slave wage. There is no other reason. They can make up any damn excuse they want, and both political parties play them as political pawns, whether it is the GOP and the Democrats, who have corporate money vested interest in making sure that we have slave labor. And then, as much as it is for the GOP in their business interest to have that, there's also the Democrats' demographic interest in having them for voting purposes, as Congresswoman Yvette Clarke decided to let loose the other day about how we want them to come into our districts to make them voters and they'll vote for us. Like, how do you say that and not realize that that's really not smart? but I would never accuse too many.
Everything's brazen now. Everything's
Yeah,
brazen.
it's just so in our faces.
Yeah, there's no secrets anymore.
Well,
here.
if you want to talk about brazen, Mayor Adams is going to let you know, New York City Mayor Adams, who probably shouldn't be there because we all did our part to help Andrew Yang when he was running for mayor, when we knew that, or who was the lady's name that was running that we also liked, Morales.
Yeah, but then that went to
that went to hell.
That went
so
to
then,
hell.
of course, somehow the establishment, the Brooklyn borough president, couldn't get more establishment than that, somehow ends up becoming the mayor, despite all of the red flags that were there. And I will never forget the progressives that were saying, don't rank Andrew Yang, rank Eric Adams instead.
Yeah.
How are you liking that now? Not so good. Listen, I'm not saying that Andrew Yang wouldn't have had his problems. He certainly would have, especially with his level of inexperience in governance. However, to suggest that he would be anything like this is a non-starter. So here we go.
Yeah. I'm happy to say that we'll be able to reverse some of the cuts to the NYPD and FDNY that we initially announced in November. First, I am really pleased to announce that we have been able to restore funding for the April Police Academy class. This means 600 additional police officers will be on the streets protecting New Yorkers coming this fall. And these officers will join 3 additional police classes that were already scheduled to graduate this year, meaning thousands of additional cops on our streets in 2024 under this administration. More police officers mean safer streets, safer subways, and a safer New York City. But in addition to that, we've heard a great deal of conversation about the 5th firefighter. I'm proud to announce that we have good news to the FDNY as we restore the 5th firefighter at 20 of the city's engine companies.
I like how he ties in the FDNY, which is an absolute good, with the NYPD, which has a lot of problems.
Got a lot of problems with you people.
So it's like, you can't criticize over-policing, because if you do, then politically speaking, I'm going to use the left wants to cut the spending on firefighters.
They do that, and they're doing, by the way, that's what they're also doing in Cop City. Do not ever, anytime anyone talks about, they always add in, and firefighter training, like as if somehow, you know what I know, the firefighters I know, they're not with this whole militant thing. I don't know why people put those in the same category.
You're right, it doesn't. What leads to less crime is better economic opportunity. That's what
it's really not that complicated.
No, it's complicated.
It's not complicated. No. I actually would love to. What I want to do is I want to take all the money from the police and give it to the firefighters and the teachers.
Oof.
That's sort of my thoughts, because what we need is more education, less patrolling. The fact that there's going to be how many new 600 whatever new police officers in New York, yeah, that's what we needed. That's what we needed. Talk about someone who isn't reading a room outside of literally the room that they're in.
You have a serious problem with the subway system in New York City. There is crime being committed underground, if you will. So you think that the way to stop
literally underground.
Yeah. So the way that you think you stop that is just putting more cops on the beat. Yeah, you may be able to deter it, but that's not changing the fact that living in New York City is almost untenable for almost everybody who doesn't have a deep bank account. Like it's
But more than anything, this kind of bullshit policing is broken windows policing. This more police on the streets is just broken windows policing. That's all it is. He might as well say we're going back to stop and frisk. Oh, we can't quite do that, but we're going to kind of do it.
And if there is one more thing that we must play, because let's face it, he is the mayor of New York City, and the budget that they have is so
I just find this really gross.
Well, apparently, Mayor Adams found the time. Again, the mayor of New York City found the time to go to Israel. That's really incredible.
The Operations Division of the Israel Police, led by Deputy Commissioner Sigal Bartzvi, was honored to host the mayor of New York City, Mr. Eric Adams, at the National Police Academy in Beit Shemesh.
See?
Yeah.
With the negotiation and with the attacks.
On the wall, right?
I'm so annoyed right now. Like, why do every time I feel like I'm just so, no, that picture's not in front of the wall, but okay. I feel used. every time I see stuff like that, I feel used. I feel used as a Jewish person. I feel used by the Zionists. I feel used by people like Eric Adams that are scoring political points by going over there and holding weapons like somehow what does that mean? And by the way, people, you really need to look into this because there is a very, very strong link between our policing, all different municipalities in this country, whether it's New York, Atlanta, whatever, and the IDF. Okay, Israel is one of the biggest like trainers and actually suppliers of our cops here. And it's, you know, municipality to municipality. But like, for example, they are very involved. The IDF has been very involved with the groups in Atlanta and regarding the cop city. So there is a very strong link between Israel and policing. And what I really think it comes to is the Fraternal Order of Police. I think that there is a I think there's a link that goes like Mossad FOP. Like it's just very nefarious. And they're just keeping each other going. But yeah, watching that makes me sick.
If you think that
Disgusting.
makes you sick, we can take it to a whole other level because now we're going to show you exactly what the real president of the United States, yes, I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's true, has to say when he sat down with Andrea Mitchell.
The fourth time you have been in Israel since October 7th. And you have said from the beginning that that massacre had to be responded to, that Israel had to invade. But now it's been 100 days. It's 23,000 Palestinian civilian lives, according to reports. The hostages, 134 hostages, 6 Americans included, have been there for all this time. Things have changed. Doesn't Israel now have to wind this down? Isn't that what you want?
Well, we all want to see this conflict end as quickly as possible. We all want to see the suffering of people who are caught in the middle end as quickly as possible.
They're not. Stop it. They're not caught in the middle. They're the target. This is the fundamental problem. Is he knows it. They all know. Well, Joe might not, because who knows what Joe knows. But like the people that are actually in charge, they know that this isn't collateral damage. Ironically, today is the day that I got to hear some of the arguments from South Africa. And let me tell you about the South African Dream Team. Loving them. If you haven't seen any of the arguments in the International Court of Justice by South Africa, strongly recommend watching. That's what people with brains do. They make valid arguments. He's sitting here lying. I know he's lying. He's been there 4 times. He already knows. He knows it's not collateral damage. He knows they're trying to commit a genocide. He doesn't care, which is why I hate watching these interviews, because she knows that he knows, and he knows she knows he knows. And they're sitting there having a conversation like none of us know.
Well, there's no question that Mitchell is trying to basically tell him, I know you're lying and you really shouldn't.
And the truth is she's a fucking tool too. So you know what? This is like one tool helping another tool be a tool.
Well, you have 2 Jewish people having a conversation right now.
It's
like they can't have any semblance of reality as to what's going on.
But when you say people caught in the middle, it makes me want to rip your throat out. There's nobody caught in the middle. There's no middle. What middle? Those are the targets. They're killing civilians. They're committing a genocide. There's no middle.
The real difference, honestly, between the Democrats and Republicans at this level of government is that when you have a face like Tony Blinken, he seems a lot more appealing than a face like John Bolton. It's a lot
that's
easier,
true.
but they're still committing the same atrocities.
Yes.
But one is just doing it more genteel than the other.
And without the ridiculous mustache.
That mustache is epic. Don't even say it. Don't say it, because I will not have those 2 things conflated in my head. That will ruin one of the greatest mental images that I have. Don't even. All right. I won't.
Seriously.
All right. Here we go.
It's vital that Israel be able to do everything possible to ensure that October 7th never happens again. And it's made good progress toward that objective.
You say they've made significant progress, but yet an important minister, Gallant, said they are about to attack Khan Yunis in the south very strongly. And there are people there who haven't even been moved back to the north.
So we've seen now a phase down of the operations in the north.
Yeah, stop.
That's important.
You know why? You know why they phased out operations in the north? Because they're getting their asses handed to them. Because the reality is the great IOF, because I can't even say IDF, they're not defending anything. They're an occupation force. They're not that great on the ground. They're really good at dropping bombs like cowards from the sky, but they're really not that great on the ground. And they're getting their asses handed to them in North Gaza. That's why they're pulling out, because they're never going to win the ground war there, which is why they have to keep bombing them from above. Cowardly. And then they go into those empty neighborhoods and dance around and do these jigs and celebrate these disgusting soldiers who I long to see in The Hague. And it's just really unbelievable. I am so embarrassed and yet just angry, and it's just disgusting.
It's also very easy to dance around and act like you're victorious when you're not being challenged by people who have anywhere near the combat skills that you do.
They're being challenged. That's why they're pulling out of North Gaza. They've had over 100 and something, it was 105 at one point, that the last number I checked, of dead IDF soldiers just from their operations in North Gaza. They're not going to walk out. Like, they're not okay losing their own people. You know, now they don't mind hostages getting killed. They've made that clear. They've killed their own hostages.
Could you also clear up the misconception regarding the hostages? You have people, including a handful of people who showed up at the freaking Golden Globes the other day with an Israel yellow ribbon pin
for the hostages,
suggesting that because for I guess the 75 hostages that remain, isn't there 10,000 Palestinian hostages?
It's more like 20. But it's really absurd, and they really just don't know how unbelievably stupid they look to everybody else in the world, people that do that. No, the hostages are not even remotely a consideration by Israel. They don't care. They made that very clear. When you're just dropping bombs on top of buildings and you have no idea where your hostages are being held, you are totally disregarding their lives. You obviously don't care. That's not your priority. Also, as we just saw recently, when Israel took out whoever they took out in Beirut, that they were how come they were able to have a targeted strategic attack there, but yet in order to get Hamas in Palestine, they have to kill all the civilians? See, that's the thing. There's nobody caught in the middle. Those are targets.
Let's finish it.
You've seen the withdrawal of a significant number of forces, of Israeli forces that were in Gaza, particularly again in the north, where they've achieved a lot. And as I said, we want to see this conflict come to an end as quickly as possible, consistent with Israel's objective of making sure that October 7th doesn't happen again. And as they're completing that effort, we want to do everything we possibly can to increase.
I don't understand how people can honestly take that seriously. They're trying to make sure that October 7th never happens again. How's that working out for you? How's that working out for you? That's like making sure 9/11 doesn't happen again. No, but something else will happen.
So let's say that let's say that Hamas has 5,000 members and you have murdered over 10,000 children. How many more members of Hamas do you think you've created?
Let me guess. Oh, come on. We should have fun math with Jen and Pete on this. So if you kill one terrorist in front of their children and they have 5 children, then that makes 5 terrorists minus the one you killed. So that's a net of 4. See that we could do like terrorist math.
And then we'll have a conversation about 7 to 10 years from now where this is becoming a story again. We got to go get them because they're going to.
Well, there won't be anything there.
The whole cycle repeats itself.
Well, no, you're going to have 2 million dead bodies in the desert.
Which is why when she says 23,000, I'm hearing it's closer to 30,000. And not only that, but you're not taking into account the deliberate starvation. And the one thing that also isn't being talked about that I came across the other day, the people in Gaza are so desperate for food that what the IDF decided to do was put out like a telegram, if you will, that hey, there's going to be like a food truck coming through, and
they bombed it.
They saw that the people were gathering, thinking that the food truck was coming, and went kapow!
I just watched an old woman crossing the street. I was watching it live happen. Somebody was filming it. Bunch of people, villagers, crossing a street. This old woman holding her grandson's hand crossing, and they just shot her dead. A sniper just shot her dead.
Sure,
and
because she was with Hamas. She's a terrorist, don't you know?
It's so ridiculous.
There we go.
Protections for civilians to make sure that humanitarian assistance is getting in and getting to people who need it. And that's what we're working on relentlessly every day. And of course, the hostages. I had an opportunity to meet with the families again. I've met with many of them, almost all of them before. on several occasions, including with President Biden. For them, these 3 months have been an eternity. Every day, every hour, every minute feels like an eternity. So we're also relentlessly focused on bringing them home.
Oh my God. But no mention of anybody else. But you know what? We're dealing with people. These people truly believe that Palestinian lives are not worth as much. They really do. And not just Palestinian lives. I mean, probably any, brown global South type nation. They don't matter. They don't matter. Just
Why
the way
would
he
they?
talks about it, it's so clear that it doesn't matter to him.
And again, to the degree that you look at the way the corporate media handles these types of situations.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have Andrea Mitchell saying, what about the 10,000 or the 20,000 Palestinian hostages?
No one talks about that.
What about she did mention the Palestinians that have been killed.
Well, that's nice of hers, even.
But the fact that they bring up the hostages, they always knee jerk back to the hostages. And that is what they constantly want to talk about. And yet at the same time, they're never going to address the fact that it is completely unequitable. There is no comparison. One is really dealing with a serious problem here, and the other.
Also, I would say that all the aid trucks that have been being sent over, that we're sending all those aid trucks, they're all piled up in the Sinai, and Israel's not letting them in. You've got like tens of thousands of trucks lined up, sitting in the desert right now with stuff in them to help Palestinians, and Israel's not letting them in. So everybody who's donating to send stuff there, that's great, but Israel's not letting any of it in.
Well, it's just Hamas's fault, don't you know?
So, but I am somewhat hopeful that the South African Dream Team might be able to accomplish something. Now, I don't know what that is, because the ICJ doesn't have any real bite. It doesn't have any there's no real consequences, but there are definitely consequences from being like the global pariah, and what that means, and now what other countries will be willing to do and sanction and whatever. Israel's already taken a huge economic hit, and it's only going to keep getting worse. Good.
So let's talk about something positive, shall we?
I don't know anything positive. My whole life is genocide.
Growing.
Okay.
Labor's growing.
Labor's growing. Labor had a good year.
Labor had a good year, and should have an even better year, and it should create as much leverage as it possibly can. And no one, with all due respect to those that are on the ground trying to make changes, the United Auto Workers of America is a substantial union. They are
I
very
love Sean
influential.
Fain.
I think we all have well, I'm not in love with Sean Fain.
They don't know.
Jen has this going on with Sean Fain.
do.
Yeah, so it's definitely
I do.
It's a real love thing.
It is.
But what is even more impressive is how they're not just resting on their laurels. Yeah, they got shit done in the upper Midwest in Michigan, but now they're taking it to the anti-labor states like Alabama. This is where things really will get interesting.
Which is just one state away from,
Well,
Florida.
Florida is hanging around. Floribama.
Well, I know people that live in that area.
Yeah, well, hello. I mean, it's beautiful up there, I will tell you. But with that said, very important developments taking place with Mercedes workers.
Oh.
Mercedes workers are looking to join UAW. And that has been brought to our attention by somebody we have known since, it's been a number of years, but we've never actually had Michael on the podcast before. And he was aware of you when you were running for Congress back in 2020. And so now we finally get to connect with I believe is still a Floridian, a local Floridian, somebody who happens to also write for The Guardian. Michael Sainato, if I said it right, because usually not everybody can say the Italian names right, but I think I did. Welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, can you hear us?
It's Sainato, but it's okay. It's close enough.
Did I say?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
And yes, I'm still in Florida.
Where are you? Where in Florida are you? We're having a delay.
Michael, your connection is definitely off. I'm wondering if it may be the laptop, or if necessary, if you want to try to hop on your cell phone, you can do that as well. What do you think would be best?
It's dragging.
Yeah.
It's lagging.
Yes. and it's got like a 7 or 8 second delay.
Okay. Let me try to like log back in. Just 2 minutes.
Take your time.
No problem.
So we will try that again, and I'm sure it will work.
We'll try to get it, because I mean, the way he's coming through, he could be in Gaza.
He could.
I mean, that's what it looked like. It was not clear. That should not be coming like that. Somebody who's in Florida.
No, but he could be in the UK. There's also that possibility.
Oh.
So as you
You
can
think?
see,
Oh, okay.
yes, absolutely.
Why do you think he's in the UK?
Because he works for the Guardian. I don't know if that means he has to be in the UK. But maybe
Don't
not.
be silly. You don't have to be
So
anywhere.
UAW announces union campaign at Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama. This is very significant. And remember, there have been multiple attempts to unionize the Amazon workers in Alabama. And we know the lengths that Mr. Dr. Evil Bezos would go to ensure that that didn't happen. There is no question that this is a very big story because UAW has a significant victory already and is looking to exercise that political weight that they now have and see if they can expand into other areas. I think this would be a pretty big deal.
And I'm just so pleased with what they're doing in general, and also the fact that they took a stand on the Israel issue and really showed that crossover.
So,
Let's
Michael,
see.
let's try it again.
Let's see. Oh, better.
How's that?
Well, it looks clearer.
Yes. Everything good?
Oh, I think
Yeah.
it's all set. All right, we're good.
Yeah, you're good now.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Michael, take it from the top. This is not a big story. This is a huge story. And again, I don't want to take anything away from what UAW was able to accomplish in the very blue collar, working class, populous state that is Michigan. When you move into a right to work state, a notorious anti-labor state like Alabama, this is a huge development, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's this is a big part of what it's the next step of their fight. There's a lot of different auto plants that have popped up in the South, and companies like Volkswagen in Chattanooga, they're looking to expand in South Carolina, and I think we know why. Because they're not, it's difficult for unions to gain ground here. So, the southern states have been, the elected officials are very anti-union. The state laws are, not great when it comes to union support. That there's just not a lot of great infrastructure, and we're in areas where it's not like there are families and families of workers who have been union for generations that to build upon. So this is a huge development. This is their second big plant in the South, where they announced they've got over 30% of the bargaining unit has signed union authorization cards. Once they get to 50, their plan is to start holding rallies and get to that 70% before demanding voluntary recognition, or now with the new National Labor Relations Boards, what happens instead of the union filing for election, they either request public recognition or the employer has to file a petition to have an election held instead. So, I think this year we're going to see some big union elections at these, places like Alabama, places like Tennessee, where, Volkswagen, they lost 2 union elections, one in 2014, one in 2019. They were really close, and they would have been huge wins, but the UAW back then is not what the UAW is right now, obviously, with Sean Fain, and they're a lot more militant. They're, taking it to these bosses. They're not afraid to talk about how much money these companies are making and make it clear to members and prospective workers that they deserve a fair share of these profits. These car companies are making more money than ever before. Car prices have been going up. And worker wages just are lagging behind. So And these jobs are really, important and high paying for the areas that they're in. But comparatively to the rest of the industry, especially in the U.S., they're lagging behind in terms of pay, in terms of working conditions, safety issues, things like that. So the impacts of getting these plants unionized will be huge, not just for these workers, but for their communities and for
Sure.
other organizing efforts. Because we've seen Alabama, the Amazon election, that still is not certified. They're still fighting over votes, and that's not going to be adjudicated by the board until this year. If there's another union election, or if the labor board decides to grant workers those unions. But there's been a lot of nasty fights, a lot of nasty union busting in the South. So this is, I think, a taste of what's to come this year from the United Auto Workers. They've made it very clear that they're going after all these big companies. Mercedes, BMW, Tesla has been put on notice. And I think we're at a point in the labor movement where people who were either apprehensive or maybe fearful are seeing other people do that, seeing what is possible. And I think the culture is changing around that, which is, great to see. So this is, really exciting, news.
Yeah, I appreciate you covering this. And, we also are friends with Jordan Cheriton of Status Quo, and they also do a lot of coverage of the labor movement. And I don't think enough regular people, especially in states that are right to work states that probably don't know, are kept aware of things, which is why people like Sean Fain are so amazing, because it's such a distinction between sort of old labor leadership, wherein, they were really just in cahoots with party leadership and everybody was friends, and they never really shared the information with the rank and file. And the fact that he provides so much information to the rank and file, it is so obvious that he's one of them. And I find that to be really refreshing. And so hopefully we see some more of that. But yeah, he's not taking any of their shit either, which I love.
Michael, can you talk about the threshold that exists in unionization? 30% being sort of the ground floor, 50% being recognition, and then 70% getting the full weight of the actual national union movement to push for what their efforts are right now, whether it is at Volkswagen in Tennessee or Mercedes in Alabama?
Well, as it is right now, a bargaining union just needs to get over 50% of union authorization cards to warrant a union election, which is kind of, the labor movement's been pushing to change that to just get card check, because you're already showing that the majority of the workers want a union. To hold an election is redundant in these regards, and it gives employers the opportunity to hire those $3,000 a day anti-union consultants to bring those people in to violate labor laws, because in covering this, and as we know, employers regularly violate labor laws, get away with it. They'll settle labor charges, and all I have to do is put up a flyer, at most reinstate a worker with back pay. And just because of how defunded the labor board has been, how stretched thin they've been, it takes so long for that to happen. It can take a year or longer, just depending on the employer and their anti-union lawyers, how much they drag it out, how much they delay, which is why we've been seeing with Starbucks still all those illegal things they've been doing. A lot of it's the labor board and courts are still here. They've been appealing everything. That's why 2 years ago almost, the Amazon union election in Alabama still not decided. Amazon workers that won a union at JFK 8 in Staten Island, they still haven't even gotten to bargaining because of how poor, how broken labor law is.
Yeah. We really need to get the PRO Act passed. Like that to me should have been passed 4 years ago at a minimum.
Well,
but like
that was
I mean, I feel like that is sort of like almost a savior for right to work states. I feel like we are so stuck, and it's so difficult when you're in a state like this to even contemplate, for people to even contemplate taking a stand. It's just, it's crushing.
And I think that of all the legislation that could have been passed in the Biden administration that they could have actually run on in 24, because he's basically a lame duck president at this point. But he would have been able to run on the PRO Act if it was passed, because if you can eliminate right to work laws, that changes everything for labor. It really does. And down here in Florida, it's obviously a huge problem, although it is a very populist working class type of disposition. The service industry plays a huge role in this state, agriculture, a huge role in this state. So a lot of people are aware of that problem. Also, the rich don't pay their fair share, especially when it comes to property taxes. I know they like to claim that they do, but they don't pay state income tax. So there's that.
We need to get rid of right to work.
We do need to get rid of right to work. That is the big, that is the anvil that's hanging over everybody's heads right now. And so I do think if they are able to break through in both right to work states like Tennessee and Alabama, that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. Do you see this based on what you're hearing on the ground right now? Is this inspiring other potential labor uprisings in other parts of not just the South, but other parts of the country where it has been very difficult to unionize with real grassroots organizing?
Well, I think a just transition's a big part of what the UAW has been trying to do. And I did a story, earlier this week where solar installers in Long Island won their union. They were inspired by the stand-up strikes. They were loving what the UAW was doing, so they reached out and said, "We want a union here." Their employer basically laid them off a week after they won their union election. So that's something they're, still fighting. So, and that's in Long Island, in New York, where with one of the highest union densities in the U.S. So, these things are happening all across the country. I think the stand-up strikes and the news and workers seeing what a union could do has inspired a lot of people in and tangential to the auto industry and, other workers as well. I don't think anyone who, works and saw that wasn't, inspired. The public was overwhelming support of that. And, here in Florida, that's, still the case. Even in, right to work laws, we have legislators. DeSantis had a big anti-union bill that's passed that takes right to work to the next level in forcing public unions to have to basically recertify every year, which is just ridiculous and a waste of resources. But that's the point. But voters supported raising the minimum wage when it was on the ballot, and that Republicans flipped out about that. But people are it's clear, the data is clear, and the benefits unions provide to workers, to their communities, to the wages in general. Florida and all throughout the southern states, our federal minimum wage and the minimum wage is basically the same, and that's ridiculous. The inflation here has been higher than the rest of the country. Housing's out of control. We have some of the biggest income and wealth inequality in cities. I think 3 of the top 10 cities in the U.S. are here in Florida. So it's really needed in the South. There's a lot of inequality, a lot of systemic racism. Unions have played an important role. We have Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I implore anyone looking at this, just read what he did with unions. Read what he said about right to work laws, because you're going to see all those anti-union conservative organizations, pretend that they're supportive of what he had to say when he was a labor leader. And that part of history isn't as taught.
No,
not nearly enough. And with
They-
DeSantis, they're going to throw it.
They were happy giving civil rights, but they weren't about to end their class war, right? Like they were good saying, okay, fine, okay, we'll give you civil rights. But now you're talking about unionizing and a rainbow coalition and poor people's part. No, we're not going to have that. That's not.
Yeah, that once you start uniting the working class,
then it's all
that's
over.
when it ends, and that's the line in the sand for a lot of people. And we're trying to keep this movement together. If I remember correctly, I think you were at the whatever the name of that big progressive conference was that was in Chicago back in the summer of 2017.
Conference, that was years ago.
Yeah. But the reason I bring that up is because there was several thousand people that were there. And that was probably the highest point for any type of a left populist movement. The whole, social justice type stuff that, gets minced into things that have nothing to do with economic populism that's desperately needed in the country. I don't know if it was strictly just because Bernie had such an amazing run, particularly in 2016, that allowed for that groundswell to grow so big, but then it seems to have, petered out to some degree. Do you see any hope for recapturing that type of energy again, or do you feel that our country really is solely reliant on sort of that Pied Piper, if you will, that comes along and then everybody just kind of rallies behind them? Do you think labor has the opportunity to grow something at that mass scale again, where we can get systemic change in this country at some point?
I think, seeing how popular the labor movement is getting and the wins, in a week or two, we'll get the union density numbers. It's possible that for the first time in years that union density has increased. We'll see how that, pans out. But the fact of the matter is there just needs to be a lot more resources put into organizing. We need labor law reform, like the PRO Act, which is passed in the House and the Senate didn't even vote on it. So we're not hearing, those elected officials have to, justify to workers, to unions, why they don't support them. We've seen elected officials get on the picket lines, but I think it's going to take more reform-minded candidates like Sean Fain, more democratic positions in unions. There's, the Teamsters was one of those things because, like you said, a lot of unions have kind of been content with the status quo in recent years, while union membership and density and wages have been trickling down. So I think, people like Sean Fain are going to have to, we need more of those people to kind of like step up and take charge and actually speak for workers and fight for these issues and make that happen, whether it's politically or through unionizing or, through, different campaigns and, getting, whether it's getting bills passed locally, state level, federal level. It's, and all these things can't happen in a vacuum because, if we're making wins through strikes and contract gains, those can be, taken away with anti-union, legislation. We've seen it at the state level, wherever, Wisconsin. So Scott Walker, union busters in these companies, if they get the right people in on their side, it's detrimental to workers, and it takes years and years to just undo those things. Like right to work. Michigan finally got rid of it after years and years and years. So it's going to be a long battle. So I'm a little optimistic. But we're not there yet in terms of.
I would definitely say that the best thing that could be used as a selling point when it comes to rallying people to the cause is the fact that you could look at what a UAW worker makes versus what a Tesla worker makes, and it's about, I don't know if it's half the amount is what a Tesla worker is making now, but it is so stark that you can't look at that and not say that organized labor allows you to make more money. And there isn't this argument. There's a lot of they're not conservative as far as I'm concerned. They're just basically anti-labor anarchists, I guess is the way I would look at it. You know, for those people who make the claim that, oh, somebody who flips burgers is not worthy of a living wage because they don't have a skill. Well, building an automobile takes a lot of skill, and it's very necessary. You know?
Flipping burger people deserve to make a living wage.
Well, yes, but I'm not. Again, I'm for a living wage. But my point is, if you were to frame it that way, I do think that would have significant. And again, a lot of people on the left just don't know how to market, don't know how to execute a story.
They're too busy fighting. We're too busy fighting amongst ourselves over who's the most woke.
Sure. Well, that's again, that's not the left. That's liberal, pathogen bullshit.
The people that are in the position to do things.
When it comes to the working class uprising in this country, I think that you can really look at what UAW is doing and see the definitive contrast between something along the lines of what Elon Musk is doing with Tesla. To me, that's a very easy selling point. You can see that somebody who is working with UAW will say, I think it's like $70,000 a year, whereas somebody with Tesla is making like $40,000 or $45,000 a year. I mean, it is so obvious that you are looking at, again, 70,000 may be the borderline of a middle class life, but at least it's there if you have full benefits. If you're making 40 to 45,000 a year with Tesla, you are not making a middle class income, not even close. So I think that to me really speaks a lot about where things need to be and where they are, and that is how you sell the labor movement going forward. You got to go on offense. People are constantly saying unions suck and all this. I'm like, listen. Union bosses and delegates that are attached to corporate influence, or dare I say, the Democratic Party establishment, that's a problem. But union labor, particularly rank and file, I just look back at what happened during Bernie versus Hillary. Anytime it was a union rank and file vote for the endorsement, it always went to Bernie. Anytime it was the board or the bosses, it always went to Hillary. It was so clear as day where the distinction was in that particular race when it came to labor.
Which is why the UAW is so awesome, because right now they actually represent rank and file.
They are. And they didn't just kowtow to, you remember when everybody was like, you got to endorse Biden.
Oh my God, I love
it. Like, I ain't having that shit. I got to worry about my workers. That's more important to me. And so the fact that this is now growing exponentially is so great to see. What are you working on in addition to the UAW story? Is there anything else you would like to mention before we conclude the conversation?
At the Teamsters, the Anheuser-Busch workers are currently fighting for a new contract. The Bud Light, they authorized a strike last month, so their contract ends at the end of next month. So we'll see if that's one of the next big strikes that we're witnessing.
The Teamsters.
Yes,
they should have let him fight.
I love the Teamsters.
They should have fought. And it turns out that what's the senator's name again from Oklahoma?
Mark Dwayne Mullins.
Yeah, Mark Dwayne Mullins. Yeah, he's an insider trader like Wasserman Schultz is. So yeah, there's a lot of good company there.
That was the stupidest. That whole thing.
For it? And Sean O'Brien's like, fuck yeah, what are you kidding me?
Yeah, my money's on O'Brien. But that's neither here nor there. They shouldn't be acting like that. That's the point. And you have Bernie trying to be like the voice of reason.
Listen, you guys, you don't want to fight. It's not a good idea. I think we can settle this, hash it out like normal people. We don't have to fight.
All right, so we have Teamsters potentially striking next month. That's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. So we still have hotel workers in Southern California. There's been like over 100 strikes since July last year. The details of those agreements haven't been released yet, but there's a hotel at LAX airport that's actually owned by pension funds, by the Carpenters Union, and they I don't know if they suspended, but they gave disciplinary action to workers for picketing. So that's kind of like
wow,
ridiculous. So that's what they've been fighting for. In that they've been leading that industry. The changes, just what hotel workers have been put through and are still being put through. All these companies kind of took advantage of the pandemic to cut labor, to cut costs. And use the pandemic as an excuse for doing that. And these workers have been standing up and fighting back against that, because these workers are in important jobs, making people a lot of money, but they're not making enough money to live in the expensive places like Los Angeles.
It's a living wage, not a minimum wage.
Right.
Got to recognize it.
Well, yeah, that's inherently a problem. I appreciate you covering labor. That's awesome.
Means a lot, Michael. How can people find you and continue to support your work?
I'm on Twitter at msainat1, and you can check out my work on a regular basis. I try to keep as busy as possible at The Guardian. So,
thank you so much for coming on and chatting, Guy. Everybody, check out his work.
I think I got that right. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Everybody. Thank you so much for coming on. Everybody, follow Michael, and yeah. Thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing, brother. We'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Oh, labor
again, it all starts with labor.
It's all labor, but it's important to have people covering it. And it is never, look, it's always sort of easy to forget that stuff is all going on, especially some of the smaller unions around the country. And there's been 100 strikes since July. We've only spoken about a handful of them. So, there's obviously a lot of things going on, and most people are not aware because it's not getting covered by design.
As Big Dumb Animal indicated.
What if they were all to unite?
It would be.
That's why we can't cover that. That's why we can't talk about it, because what we really need is general strike. Now, my understanding is that Sean Fain has been working with other unions to get everybody's contracts to be up at the same time, so that there could potentially be a very broad strike situation with other unions as well.
I hope he's got some good security detail. That's all I can say.
He is just, I love him.
Yeah, I know he has that attitude of like, I can handle shit on my own, but let me tell you something. When the system's falling apart, there's no telling the lengths that
the man has got to do what the man's going to do. Like, it's not going to, I don't know. It's awesome.
If you like our Small But Mighty channel, make sure you go to patreon.com for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter by Small But Mighty channel. You get that Lulu sticker, which is also adorable.
With a handwritten note from Jen.
Handwritten note from Jen. They can also communicate with you directly.
If you join Patreon, then you can communicate directly with me.
If you do not want to put your name on the grid, which you have,
you don't want to talk about myself in third person.
No.
It's hard not to when the show's called Generational Change. Well, my whole life is third person. Our whole brand is a third person.
$25 contributors will get themselves the Generational Change jersey or T-shirt, rocking with silky smooth tri-blend baseball jersey. It helps us a lot. You have a new concept that you are trying on.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was able to, apparently Patreon has, you could have a store and sell digital products. Now it's really meant for people to be selling, like, I guess, video clips or whatever, memes or whatever digital products that their channel is making. And I just wanted to hypothetically see what would happen if I listed an actual product.
Well, let Randall know what particular merch you now have on the.
Oh, well, no, right now there's only one thing up there. It's just a Frida collage that it was just sort of a test to see if I could actually have a store on Patreon that sells things. And I still don't know if it worked. Somebody else can tell me, because I don't know if it has to actually be a digital product. I put the picture of it on there, so we'll see. But yeah, I'd like to have more stuff. I could put more stuff for sale.
JD Party Hat wants to know if we're going to have ourselves a Discord channel of some kind.
Oh God, JD Party Hat. I have tried so hard with the Discord. Let me explain to you. My problems are thus with the Discord. It's just too complicated for me. It just is. I've tried. I've been interviewed by the people in Discord, at which point I learned they never confuse them with the Reddit people, because that's like an insult. That was worse than calling like the Scotsman and Irishman or vice versa. It was horrible. My problem with Discord is that I'm just too stupid to understand how to work it.
Well, at least you can, own that.
Oh, I own that completely. And so, like, when I was working, yes, that's our new, we have Will Caspers.
Shout out to Will Caspers.
Will Caspers, new patron.
New $10 patron.
But yeah, so here's the thing. When I was doing the Gen Z report, which I still would love to have a functional Gen Z report, the kids were all communicating on Discord. So I actually do have a Discord channel. I have no idea how to work it. I created it. Don't ask me how. I could never duplicate it. And I was able to successfully invite the kids from the thing, but I wouldn't even know how to check it again. So unless somebody wants to volunteer to run a Discord for us, but we don't even have a mod. Like, I don't know. But yes, I would be happy to have a Discord channel, but I'm too stupid to participate in Discord.
If you do not want to put your name on the grid, you can go over to Cash App, $GenChange. Any amount there you would choose to contribute is obviously tremendously appreciated.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Travers. Okay, you're right. That's a good point. Solid.
Yeah, let's
Solid.
see. Yeah.
And I do love me a Scotsman.
Well, Scotsman.
I do love me a Scot. I do.
How could you not?
I most certainly
With
do.
or without the kilt?
Either.
Oh,
Doesn't matter.
they don't even have to wear nothing.
They don't wear anything. I do like me a Scotsman. But yeah.
Do we want to cover that one?
What stupid shit do you want to talk about that I'm going to not want to talk about? I don't want to talk about. I definitely don't care about Aaron Rodgers.
I forgot to play the clip on you.
First of all, Aaron Rodgers, whatever he said, I don't know. I don't care. Jimmy Kimmel, grow a fucking pair. That's all I know. I don't even know what the conversation is. I don't care. Jimmy Kimmel, grow a pair.
Jimmy Kimmel is a talentless hack as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know anything
just
about
don't think
that,
there's
but
anything
if
useful to him.
there is nothing that could have come out of Aaron Rodgers' mouth, nothing that should be able to offend you to that level as a grown human being.
What he said wasn't even that big of a deal.
No, because it was taken as if he was implying that Jimmy Kimmel had anything to do with Epstein's
but
Island.
if you listen to it, it doesn't sound like that at all.
No, what he was saying is
he's
that
just not going to like the list coming out because apparently some of his friends are affiliated with Epstein. And
he
guess
wasn't,
what? And guess what? They are.
Right, but he wasn't in any way insinuating that he was on the list. He was referencing something that had happened earlier between the two of them, wherein Kimmel didn't want a list to come out. So he was just referencing it like, oh, well, Kimmel's not going to like this. Not saying he was on it.
But the way that
oh my God.
The way that Kimmel reacted to it was like of a guilty man. It was so.
And I don't think that.
No,
I have no opinion on Jimmy Kimmel whatsoever.
I just think Jimmy Kimmel's a yes man of the highest order.
I cannot fathom being that upset about something that Aaron Rodgers said about you. By the way, in passing, it wasn't even the entire principle of that conversation he was having with. I saw part of it, but like, it's like how self-absorbed are you? It's sort of like Debbie thinking they're trying to assassinate her at the Pride Parade.
Our favorite Scots Irish wants you to know that the kilt's not too warm. I think I understand what he's saying.
That's why you got to go to the Highlands. That's where I want to go. I'm going to go to the Highlands.
The big problem here,
find me a Scotsman in the Highlands,
and where a lot of this argument comes into play, and why it's so debated at this point, is because Aaron Rodgers has been very vocal about the fact that he not only did not take the vaccine, but he took ivermectin as well. And he is very tight with Joe Rogan. And he has been very adamant that there are alternatives to the vaccine. And of course, Jimmy Kimmel was somebody who said everybody must take the vaccine and get their boosters and advocated for it. And why would Jimmy Kimmel have been such a huge advocate for endless medical use? Because
Pfizer?
His show is sponsored by Pfizer, among other people.
Oh my goodness.
So which is all these major corporations that contribute to these late night television shows.
I just understand you could be mean about Aaron Rodgers. First of all, those puppy dog eyes. Okay, first of all, and I do love quarterbacks, but like he's particularly yummy. But I don't understand how anybody could be so upset. Although then again, I don't understand how people can hate me for what I think when I have no power to do anything about it either. So I don't understand that.
Well, the other thing that's so amazing that I don't think people really recognize is that when you listen to what his teammates say about him, you would think that if Aaron Rodgers was so off the wall, that he didn't know anything, that he was completely out of sight, out of mind with his opinions and how he treats people, his teammates love him. And he hasn't played at all this year.
I love him.
He is beloved in his locker room. So as far as I'm concerned,
loved right here.
It would sit. I'm a Giants fan. I can't.
I don't care. I like quarterbacks.
The real issue is the fact that he went on the Pat McAfee show, which is on ESPN, which is a part of the ABC broadcasting, controlled and owned by Disney. So as a result,
follow the money.
So as a result, Aaron Rodgers makes this statement on Pat McAfee's show. Jimmy Kimmel blows a gasket.
Loses it.
And now I'm not even going to tell you until after I play this clip, but you get the idea as to what the results have been, because Jimmy Kimmel and the higher ups were not too happy with what Aaron Rodgers had to say.
Oh my God, no.
What we do know is the guy that stopped by yesterday caused quite a conversation.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit.
Now,
per usual.
Not like that. The So Aaron Rodgers Tuesday, season 4 is done.
Yeah.
Complete. This season.
There's going to be a lot of people that are happy with that, myself included, to be honest. With the way it ended, it got real loud. And real loud. I'm happy that is not going to be my mentions going forward, which is great news. We're a conversation show. People are having conversations. We live in a country that has freedom of speech, but also you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your freedom of speech. So what I'm saying is we've given a lot of people who've been waiting for us to fail a lot of ammo and things to attack us for over the last week. And we would love to get back to the point where we just move on and continue to silence all the haters over here who can't negotiate as good as I can, all the people over here who can't create a show as good as us, and all the people up here who are just going to always be here, and they're going to hustle and do their thing, which I respect. But we need to do that, and that is our focus. That is our goal. And Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Famer. He's a 4-time MVP. He's a massive piece of the NFL story. Whenever you go back and tell it, he will be a huge part of it. We are very lucky to get a chance to chat with him and learn from him. Some of his thoughts and opinions, though, do piss off a lot of people. And I'm pumped that is no longer going to be every single Wednesday of my life, which it has been for the last few weeks. On Friday, obviously, I threw us into the fire as well. Forever stand by that. Everything else, though, just can't do that and not what we want to be known for. And I'm also pumped that I don't have to do these types of talks anymore. So with that being said, sports are alive right now.
Okay, so it's just another example of somebody wanting to just put their head in the sand and just stick with sports and not get involved in anything and not take a stand on anything. That's what that sounded like to me. Somebody rambling on and on and on from whatever their corporate donor told his boss to tell him to say.
You better tell him to shut up. And of course, this gets back to the whole issue of, and this brings the whole show full circle. Now, on the one hand, you've got Governor DeSantis and the GOP saying we are going to censor your dictionaries. And then you have the Democrat establishment telling a sports/talk show that they can't talk to Aaron Rodgers because he has opinions that we don't like. So we have to censor you now.
We can't talk to Aaron Rodgers because he has an opinion we don't like.
What's going to happen when Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to come back and he's going to have a great season next year, and they are going to and listen,
they'll talk to him then. Of course,
there are people that are going to try not to talk to him.
No, they'll still talk to him. If it would get ratings, they'll talk to him because at the end of the day, that's all they care about. That's the truth. They don't have principles. They have donors and they have ratings, and that's it. They have numbers, and the numbers tell them to do this. They do this. They have no opinions. They have no morals. They don't have anything. They have numbers and ratings.
He's at Metalopoly. He's absolutely right. It didn't piss off a lot of people. It pissed off Jimmy Kimmel, who has some power, and then the people above Jimmy Kimmel who really didn't like what Aaron Rodgers had to say.
All I can say is Jimmy Kimmel, I really never had much of an opinion on him one way or the other, and now I look at him as sackless.
JD, I definitely remember the Man Show from the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was with Adam Carolla, and he was the biggest misogynist, chauvinist you could possibly try to be. Now, of course, it was all done in jest, but you cannot.
That stuff doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother me either.
It shouldn't bother you because you're a man.
No,
but it doesn't bother me.
Listen, women being abused and heckled is bad. I'm not denying that.
Humor is humor. Dice made fun of everybody. It was all funny.
And when athletes say anything progressive, they tell them to shut up and play ball. That is correct. And again, this is what happens when you go off the reservation. And that could be on both sides. It doesn't matter because economic populism, whether it's left or right, granted, we're on the left, but never deny that when you have a thought that is in any way going against the grain of what the corporate funded establishment wants, they will rain holy hell on you in more ways than you could possibly imagine. Now, does Aaron Rodgers care? No. In fact, this is only going to make Aaron Rodgers more popular as a result, as it should. Now, somebody like Jimmy Kimmel, is he going to suffer any consequences for basically being a complete hack? Probably not.
Well, he's a pussy in my eyes now. I can't be the only one.
Again, it's one thing if he just sent a message to Aaron Rodgers saying, thou protest too much or something along those lines, which would have probably been the right way to go about it. But instead, he flew into a rage. He went berserk over it. And only somebody who is either guilty themselves or knows that their comrades are guilty can react in such a manner. The fact is that my understanding is that Kimmel is very good friends with Epstein's private chef. And this is something that's been known for a long time. So his private chef, who has been to the island, is well aware of a lot of the things that went on. And Kimmel was good friends with him. Now, does that mean that the chef confided anything to Kimmel? I don't know. But the fact that he reacted the way that he did,
It's more suspicious than not.
that's more suspicious than not saying anything at all.
For sure.
If he just ignored it, it wouldn't have been anything to really talk about.
I gotta
But
go pick up Graham.
that is how it is. So with that said, Monday, 9 o'clock, our normally scheduled time on MLK Day.
We don't have normal times.
We don't, but it's between 1 and 9. That's usually how it goes.
Between one.
We are going to be speaking with Angela McArdle, who is the chair of the Libertarian Party of America. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation because we need to be able to address Mr. Grumbine. The things that the libertarians and progressives agree on versus
Don't
the
pick on
things that
Steve
they
today.
don't.
He's having a
No,
bad
I
day.
know Steve's having a bad day. I know. So we will have that conversation because, as I said, there are many intersecting points between the libertarians and, progressives, left populists, whatever you want to call it. There is also a lot of disagreement. And so I think that it's important to have that type of a conversation because the one big difference that I do believe, we'll leave on this note, between the libertarians and the Greens, the Democratic Party completely ignores anything that the Greens try to push politically, whereas the libertarians are constantly being courted, if you will, by the GOP because they know that what they're fighting for is very popular to a lot of people. So they know from an electoral standpoint, it pays to play in that sandbox. Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, need I say more, probably the two most popular in their respective chambers in the GOP on Capitol Hill. Thank you all so very much.
We'll see you guys Monday.
Metalopoly, Travers, JD Party Hat, Randall Giovanetti. I know I said that one right. You don't like my music. It's been a smaller crowd today.
That's okay. I really have to go get Graham because
Sable,
he's not
all
having
you guys,
dinner.
and last time to Willie Bragg especially and to Double K. Thank you for your
Thank you,
amazing
guys.
support. We'll see you Monday.